capital, which is to say the value that I have, and make it more valuable to my neighbor, to my family, to other people. I'm gonna follow the Franz Weber idea in his sociology back in the 1920s of the the rise of capitalism and the Protestant ethic. The Protestant ethic, the whole Reformation ethic, is of course thinking about the other. All technology comes from that. All science comes from the gospel. There is no way science can have risen in any other framework or any other philosophy or any other religion or any religion. Those things do not come from any system of thought apart from revelation, apart from the Christian center of the world itself. Because at the very heart of the entire universe is the Word of God. That is to say, the person of the Lord Jesus, but also the revelation, the outpouring of words that are the guide for living, the guide for every culture and every society, and also the means by which God talks to individual men and women so that they might love Him and serve Him. That is the purpose of the Scriptures. The revelation is for God to call His people to Himself, and to be by them enjoyed and glorified. And those who are not so called, well, their destruction and their having been misled in their lives, that is also to His glory. That you could call that the doctrine of reprobation, where you have the elect and then you have the reprobate. God making a distinction between man. There are the goats, there are the sheep, there is the wheat, there are the tares. That is a simple claim that Christianity makes upon human society and all of nature. Right, all of creation is subject to God and His law and His word, imposing itself on all, imposing itself on economic system, upon stock markets, upon technologies, upon abuses, upon crimes, and all these things where there is human action. There is the providence of God and the rule by which these things unfold, whether it's a war or the rise of the surprise president Donald Trump. The many things that happen are by God's providence, and they fit into His what Christians call His eternal decree. Now, my name is David Toulis, and you've heard some of these things at Sunday school if you attend a church or are a member of a church. My goal here at the David Toulis Show on Nooga Radio is to increase our prosperity, and I want to do that by looking out for the weaker people among us. And that's one reason, as I'm trying to explain, for my legal review project, which faces hurdles that are simply unbelievable, because at every turn the demands of the law that I'm finding are in the law. The demands of the law require reform of practice, not God's law. Here we're talking about man's laws. Man's laws in our statutes, in our court cases, require a reform of practice, a practice by officers, by police, by sheriff's deputies, by THP people and others, practices that are abusive of the poor, abusive of the stranger/alien, and the other categories that God shows particular care for, the widow and the orphan. Those are four categories that, of course, it would include the Guatemalan immigrant here in Chattanooga. These are people who God requires the authority to protect and not to abuse. And yet we have things turned on their head today in many respects. Things are turned upside down. And they've been turned upside down by our consent. That is to say, the consent of common people like you and me, and by the consent of the Christian church. The Christian church having said nothing about slavery for 2 centuries. And even now, it really is not saying, well, what can we as Christians do to make amends to the former slave people? And I'm not suggesting, of course, that Congress pass a restitution package or anything like that. I'm not saying that there should be money laid aside so that every black person gets a check. That's not a reparation. The reparation that I have in view is the ending of a negative, not the giving of a positive, not the sending of a check, or Treasury Department direct deposit to every black person who shows up in the census. That's not what I have in view. But what I do have in view is this whole question about police abuse of black people, starting with them. I think we should start with them, and we should have them in view, in sorrow for what we, the white race, have done for centuries. It preached even in the churches were the bans that were as they escalated prior to the war to prevent Southern independence. The bans upon blacks, the rules read from the pulpit with full compliance of churches. In some churches, even renting out slaves. The worst form of chattel slavery was the rented slave, who was used up at the end of the summer or the harvest season, just totally used up by the landowner who hired it. And the investment, right? The church held that group of slaves as an investment, perhaps given by bequeathal from an estate, or paying a payment of a tithe or something like that, renting those slaves out. And the church, where the word of God is preached, holding those slaves, wearing them down unto death, the rented slave having a much shorter lifespan than others who are owned personally. So this is part of the report of an important book in coming from the world of the Reconstructionist writers, that is to say, Christian Reconstruction, which has, by my evaluation, the best to offer in Christendom. Gary North, among the leading writers, R.J. Rushdoony, another one whose work I have sent in quantity to prisoners whom I'm hoping that when they leave prison, they will join in the effort of prison and penal reform, having been in the state hellhole as state slaves, one for many years, one for, I think, about 6 or 7 years for a property crime. And one is getting out in April. That's Robert Z. Whipple, whom I would say is a Christian brother, and whom I hope when he is out finally will use his great legal knowledge, having obtained that as jailhouse lawyer, you might say, to bring about good. The prison system faces a renewal vote in the General Assembly. And have you heard any Christian minister mention this prospect, that there could be, if Christians demanded an end to the prison system, it could be ended by vote this summer? Well, it won't happen because no Christian thinks anything about it. No Christian thinks that God has anything to say about justice. Somehow the idea that God cares about justice first has escaped the modern teaching and the modern ethic. This is David Toulis. I argue that you should love your neighbor and buy local. 800-8949. The phone number is 800-8949. After all, you have gotten 3 hours of Sean Hannity. So you go to sleep, and in the morning, wake up and take 2 hours of David Toulis, your remedy, you could say, from liberalism. And even, I would say, even conservatism. Conservatism is in a way worse than liberalism. It is schizophrenic to the core. The Republicans, worse in many ways than Democrats, worse than Democrats in many, many ways. 800-8949, brought to you by yournews.com, yournews.com. And check out this morning, my letter. What does David Toulis have to say of any value to Governor Bill Haslam? It is a copy of a letter I sent him following a couple weeks later my having put him on administrative notice about the statutes that his Department of Safety and Homeland Security enforces very, very generously, very, very broadly against everybody in the state. Now, love your neighbor and buy local. Near is better than far, small than big, simple than complex. Simple than complex. And the number, as I said, is 800-8949. And caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, David? I just recently started listening to you, and I think you're very intelligent, very informative, and you speak about the truth. I just heard your comment about reparations from slavery, and I just want to make a comment on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. You know, reparations should not come in the form of check, but actually they should stop. They should, assist to stop the negative treatment of blacks, young, old, male, and female, and any minority to that extent. But I specifically, I think that the programs in place, such as affirmative action or other programs that are there to assist blacks that have been discriminated and left out of the opportunity pool for so long, I think those should remain in place in certain areas, in certain instances and aspects. I think that that is a form of reparation, in fact, and I think that it does serve good in many instances. You know, for example, you can take the Justice Clarence Thomas. He benefited greatly from affirmative action, but now as someone who stands against it, which is odd to me. I just like to hear some of your comments on a little bit more of that. Thank you.
I appreciate the call. Again, the number is 800-8949. The question is, if I'm suggesting here that there should be reparations generally by the white race that oppressed the black race, would not affirmative action be included in that? Affirmative action, of course, is the rule, or often in statute, these rules appear where there is a statutory favor for one race over the other. And one could say historically, perhaps, that since the white race had soaked up the capital of the black race for 2 centuries, just soaked it in, leaving that race ignorant, unprepared, without capital. Even after, when slavery was over, blacks were manumitted without any capital. They had gotten no capital. That there should be a compensation over time in law that favors the black race or other minorities as against whites. And it would seem a form of judgment against the white race that these laws have been in effect. In other words, a lashing of the white in the law by the beneficiaries of affirmative action, which would be blacks, and in some places that would be Hispanics and Orientals have certain access by not say putting the hand on the scale of the admissions office that, well, we have to have 20% blacks, we have to have 9% Hispanics, and we have to have 8% or 7% of Orientals, and then we'll take the best of the whites. That's what we have with affirmative action, where there's a hand on the scale, put there by law. And I would say that it's unjust. These are unjust because they're not allowing the marketplace to function. They're understandable. Thanks, caller. Again, thank you very much for your call. And the number again is 800-8949, 800-8949. So affirmative action seems historically a judgment, a lash against the white man for his past abuses, favoring these other, but it's by law. So in other words, it's unjust, right? It's unjust to have the hand of law weighing on the scale of something that should be open, right? If you're running a university, you want to have the best and the most bright prospects coming to you so that you can claim them as your own as they go out in the world. You can boast that, well, we have the best graduates, and we have the biggest philanthropic foundation because our graduates have fed us donations over the years from their great success. The problem with affirmative action is that it's unjust. Okay, it's unjust because you're having a racist component in your law. If racism is evil when the whites are doing it, is it evil for the blacks to do it, or for there to be a law that favors any one particular race? As in South Africa, the apartheid system, which endured for a long time in the 20th century, was explicitly racist. It was explicitly racist, and it came out of the Dutch Reformed Church. Oddly enough, I'm a Reformed Presbyterian, and from my people on the Dutch side came this atrocious racist system. One of the early prime ministers that built the first statutes against blacks was a Dutch Reformed minister. And these are people who sing the Psalms on the Lord's Day. This is what they did. They somehow thought that God didn't care about abuse of an entire race of people, and a virtual enslavement in a pretended free market of the black people. But South African apartheid was, as Paul Johnson tells in his book Modern Times, it was a socialist economy. It was a managed economy. It was social engineering down to the core on a strictly racial line. So again, the question that the caller raised, I do thank you for calling me. I appreciate that very much. What are reparations? do we want to support affirmative action? And I would say no. But if you, my white listener, my Caucasian listeners, are against affirmative action because it's liberal, right? It's liberal and it's socialistic, and it's social engineering. What do you propose? Do you propose a private solution? And that's what I propose, but it's not going to happen. We won't grow past, by God's grace and our private labors in mercy upon others. We won't grow past the era of affirmative action unless those private initiatives take place. That is to say, you, my listener, if you, my listener, and if you can encourage one other person to do the same, to find a disadvantaged family of another race here in Chattanooga, and help that family and adopt that family and make that family sort of yours, right? In the sense of mercy and grace. If you can do that, you then are going to supplant the demand for reparations that are compulsory, because affirmative action is a compulsory reparation. It is a compulsory reparation, and because it's compulsory and in the statute, I would say it's a judgment against the whites, right? Because your smart daughter applying for college access can't get in to her first or second or even third choice because of an affirmative action protocol that says, well, we only take 56% whites, and the rest have to be minorities. And your daughter was just at the cutoff, so we can't take her. She was a marginal candidate, so we can't take her. But we have to take these much less intelligent, much less advantaged Black people and Hispanic people in our school. Those are decisions that are not really just, and not really just for the institution, and they have a racist origin. But so how do we supplant state-based do-goodism? How do we supplant state-based engineering to make things right? Well, we can't. We can't unless we have, starting with you, my listener, making good personally. And so what that means is it means going out of your way on behalf of some person from another race, a race has been disadvantaged, a race that is bitter, a race has a very, very light trigger finger on being offended, right? Many Black people are easily offended by white people. And so knowing these things and knowing that Black people tend to see racism more than we do, it's understandable that they do. You deal with that person and you help that person because you are, if you're a Christian, I would say because you have been given God's grace and you want to extend that grace that God gave you in your soul and to your family and to your color, right? He gave an advantage to you in your color. You have a capital base that Black person doesn't have. You have an ancestry in capitalism and entrepreneurship that family and that couple or that man doesn't have. And so you are going to extend social capital to that Black family or that immigrant family, the Roman Catholic family from Honduras, right, with the 9 kids, that one. You are going to adopt that family and you're going to say, I'm here to help. I'm here to make things good for you. What can I do to help you? What can I do to extend the grace God gave me to you? 800-8949, 800-8949. And I do, I'm here and I want to, if I can help you, my listener, solve a problem, just call me and let's try to work through it together. You can have the microphone. Okay. You can have the microphone to tell about your situation. I'm very open to that. But just keep in mind that we want to help the other listener. Right? If you're a listener, there's another listener out there, and what you have to say has to be given to me to consider so that we can benefit that other person. That's what I'm really concerned about, that you, my listener, benefit. I want you to benefit from what I have to offer you. And this labor here at Noogic Radio is a labor in capital disbursement, right? This is kind of my donation to you, Chattanooga, you, my listener, at 800-8949, brought to you by yournews.com, yournews.com, and also Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. Though Nooganomics is not a popular website. I just want you to know that it's not popular. So don't go there if you want to see, nice looking girls and flashy headlines. I go into the deep story. And there is, even in Tennessee, we hear a lot about the deep state in the national sector. There is, even here in Tennessee, a deep state. It operates against the interest primarily of those whom in the word, in the scripture, God protects. I was been reading in Jeremiah, and I was just reading, I think I may have read this yesterday at family worship after dinner, or maybe the day before, Jeremiah 22, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, execute ye judgment and righteousness, and deliver the spoiled out of the hand of the oppressor. Okay, see that's part of reparations, is delivering the spoiled out of the hand of the oppressor. That's what transportation administrative notice is all about, because the minority is the victim. The minority is in the hand of the oppressor. His numbers are filling the hellhole downtown next to the Justice Building. The Justice Building hellhole neighbor, the building that looks like a fort. Do no violence to the stranger, the fatherless, nor the widow, neither shed innocent blood in this place. Neil Pinkston defends the status quo, just as Chattanooga cops have defended the killers of babies on Vance Road. They did it for 20 years. They defended the killers of babies in Chattanooga. The mayors of Chattanooga ordered their cops to defend the baby killers down there. And the history, by the way, the history of the Chattanooga Abortion Clinic is written by me. I have the main history of that death mill in Chattanooga, and you'll find it at Nooganomics.com. The company was called Chattanooga Women's Clinic. We've almost forgotten about it, but Christian people brought an end to that hellhole of an abattoir, the slaughterhouse for baby girls and baby boys, Black, Hispanic, and Caucasian, and others, destroyed there, 30,000 plus. Local action solved a national problem, right? I believe that there are national problems, yes, and many of them have a local manifestation. We can solve those problems here. We can solve them here because they are local problems. And I do appreciate my listener, going to Nooganomics.com. Again, it's not popular, and it's only for a few people. It's only for a few people. It's not for everybody. Believe me, it's not for everybody. Just a few people really matter. They're the ones, like you, my listener, who have a sphere of influence. You, my listener, who have a sphere of encouraging other people to do right, to bring about the reparations that my caller mentioned. I do thank you for that call. We want to have reparations, but again, I think it's in the area of voluntary action. It's not compulsory action. It's not by written law that one race has to be favored over another. No, let us, if we're white, favor the Black. Let us, if we're white, favor the Hispanic. What can I do to help the Hispanic family who's got some real trouble? And here it is tax time, and here's the dad who's got money coming in from cash. It's all kept under his mattress. This family lives 2 blocks down with about four or five cars, 2 of them in working order in the front yard. Those are my neighbors, and you, my listener, you need to care about that family. You need to go over there and say, what can I do for you? What can I do to help you? I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. What can I do? And that is brought about by familiarity. They'll know if you're genuine. They'll know if you're just a hypocrite. I want you, my listener, to be a genuine, caring person. That is how we're going to bring about reformation. And that, if you and other people do the same thing, we're going to increase our capital base in Chattanooga and Hamilton County 5x, 6x. That's a great ROI when you think about it, a great return on investment. And now I have got some important messages for you. David Tula Show.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3.